Hello, lighting people. Lighting touches many aspects of life, and we thought it would be a good idea to invite someone who's a proponent for responsible lighting for environment, human health, and wildlife. You've seen her in LDNA, you've seen her speak at multiple IES conferences, and today it's our pleasure to be joined by Jane Slade for 5 big questions. Jane, hello, and thank you for joining us today.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Jane, thank you for being a part of this. And if I may start with my own confession, I've been in the lighting industry a long time. I've been aware of dark sky initiatives and other initiatives that are focused on some of these matters that you're focused on as well, as far as responsible lighting for human health and wildlife and the environment. And I always felt that if a manufacturer provided the lighting that a distributor, contractor, end user wanted, it was good quality lighting with good cutoff, that I did my part if I was part of that equation. And I hear risings of issues relating to some of these matters that get my attention from time to time, but frankly, I've never focused enough attention to truly get immersed and to truly do something more proactive in relation to these types of matters. So tell me, from your perspective and in your words, why is this matter important?
So the lighting industry has completely changed from before LEDs to after LEDs. When we lost the parameter of electricity being something that had to be paid for because it's essentially free or very cheap with LEDs, we lost our bearings in terms of lighting the environment. And light, more than any other factor, is what tunes the relationships between and within species. So we all, as humans, we wake with the light and we go to sleep with the night. However, there are many, many species that are nocturnal, from amphibians to birds to insects. Pollinators can be nocturnal. And so when we shine light at night, we start to really play with the natural balance that was nudged into place over eons. And to give you some examples, LED lighting skews color, as we know, because it has a certain rendering. Well, this shifts the way that pollinators now make their selection of which plants to pollinate. Plants also grow differently when they receive light at night because they think they're being out competed in the forest. So instead of growing leaves and photosynthetic machinery, they start growing really long and lean. So we're changing the composition of plant bodies. Birds cannot see the map of the stars to migrate. And many other species have a huge change in behavior when we shine light at night. And what scares me the most is not that any one species is changing, is that the relationships are changing. And this will have a huge impact on biodiversity and interdependence. And there's no other factor. The factor of wildlife is going to be what talks about the human health factor. So if wildlife is healthy, then humans are healthy. So if we're not treating wildlife with the natural daylight cycle, then this is going to have a huge impact on humans.
So there's one organization that is well known in lighting circles, of course, the International Dark Sky Association, and they have this fixture seal of approval program that in their mission is some of the things, maybe not everything you just touched on. So in addition to that type of program, what else would you like to see from other organizations or from government to help promote or to help support some of these issues that are important that you're speaking of here?
So the dark sky movement is super important, but for most people, we are really tired of climate change. It's scary, it's daunting, it's overwhelming. And you may only get a minute or so of somebody's attention, maybe 20 seconds. So you get the dark sky movement to make your influence. That's your term. But for most people, they don't remember the night sky. In fact, it's estimated that 8 out of 10 school children do not remember the night sky. So, or they don't have any access to it. So it's a loss that they don't really feel. And so we really need to generate awareness. And so, it was actually said that in the 1950s, doctors used to prescribe cigarettes and endorse them. It's not an intuitive concept that light triggers wildlife or humans. In fact, the term light pollution doesn't really elicit alarm. And, I do think that the fixture approval for International Dark Sky Association is important, but it's not a carte blanche answer. Because if I take a 20,000 lumen fixture and it's dark sky compliant, but I mount it on a 10-foot pole, well, that's all bouncing right back up to the sky anyway. So the number one thing that we need to do is generate awareness, because people are not monsters. They don't actually want to be causing harm. In fact, I've had many people come to me saying, I used to leave the yard light on and I don't anymore because I realize. So it can be such a simple change. So awareness, but also using controls to actually turn the lights out at night, give that respite back to wildlife. If you think about the term lighting controls, it implies we haven't been in control. And so we really have left the lights on because no one's sort of taken any responsibility. And so we really need to get the lights turned out at night and bring darkness, which is an integral part of the natural daylight cycle, back for wildlife.
Interesting stuff. And you mentioned a moment ago about the person leaving the yard light on.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why, one of the reasons why people have their yard lights on is for safety and security. And when we think of that in a more of a commercial setting or an urban setting, a gas station is often noted as a place that has just overlit. And the people on the side of lighting gas stations very brightly say that it's for safety and security is one of the main reasons. So, and as a father of a teenage girl who drives, I would want my girl to go to a very well lit gas station versus one that's sparsely lit. I've heard you speak in the past, and there are scholarly articles and other studies that have been done that create a correlation between lighting and lighting and safety. Mm-hmm. And then there's others that you've claimed that say there isn't much, or there isn't a correlation between those things. So what are we to believe in that argument or that conversation about light and safety?
This is such an important question because it really gets down to the brass tacks, which is that people feel safe around light. They don't feel safe around darkness. Yet that's not really the full story. And so more light can be safer, but it's not always safer. So the eye, the biological eye for humans, for birds, for other organisms, can see at really low light levels and at really high light levels, but not at the same time. There's an adaptation. So when you go from dark to light, so say you leave a matinee movie and you come out to the parking lot and you start squinting, that's your eye adapting to the brightness. That takes 1 to 2 minutes. In the reverse direction, it can take up to an hour. So that's not really being factored in to good, high quality, science-based lighting design when we're saying, oh, there was a crime, let me just throw another floodlight on, because you're actually creating blind spots and glare that can create more hazard, more places for criminals to hide. So it's a much more nuanced question in terms of making good design. And it really depends on the application. And that's why we have recommended practices per application. So if you're dealing with a crosswalk, you want actually contrast. But if you're dealing with places where you want to have a relative assessment of a broad area, you want uniformity. So this is really all about good lighting design, which any lighting designer will tell you is about art and science. So it's not a straight answer, but more light can actually be less safe.
Interesting. And when we look at the people who influence lighting design, certainly we hope to have really good lighting designers, really good engineers who take all things into consideration, from code to foot candles to some of the human health and environmental aspects that you're speaking of here. But we also know that there's people outside of the lighting realm, outside of the design realm, that influence buying decisions, whether it's a financial person or a legal person. There's liability. There's that parking lot owner, that parking garage owner who wants to help reduce crime in that property. So he or she will say, we need to just blast it with more light. And the lawyers will say, yeah, that's a great idea. This will help reduce liability, so we can go to court and say that we increase the light. So whether that's right or wrong, because you answered that already, how do we shift the paradigm? How do we shift that conversation when people use that as a knee-jerk solution that might have other consequences that they're not considering, like these?
So light is experiential, and yet a lot of education is on a slide, on a PowerPoint slide. And I think that we really need to start developing more broad ways of educating and giving people the experience of what is 1 foot candle? What is 1 foot candle when you come from brightness? What is 1 foot candle when you come from darkness? Those are two different experiences. And until you really understand that, then it's very hard to educate on the topic. So I think that we do really have to create more experiential educational opportunities for people.
And so when we look at the more educated person who knows a lot of those things about the foot candles and knows that lighting a tunnel is different than lighting an outdoor stadium, when you look at the educated people who still might like I mentioned, I did it earlier in this conversation, they still might not treat this matter as important as it should be in your eyes. What can we do to them? What can we do to inform them or inspire them to consider more of these environmental, wildlife, human health issues in their future designs?
I think it's really important to get specific. So when we talk about wildlife, I have a presentation called Wildlife as Form Giver in terms of really using the needs of wildlife as a template for how we design. But I joke that I should call the presentation Cute Animals as Form Giver. And the truth of the matter is that when you use words like green design, sustainability, wildlife, these are very broad concepts. They're daunting. And if we can get specific, so I always say, get specific about an animal or plant that's in your project. Speak to it specifically. Now, I would caution that you don't want to over design to that one plant or animal, because there's nothing to replace darkness. There's no one wavelength that's going to work on, they always say red wavelength could be a great option, except it's terrible for birds. It actually will send birds to migrate in the wrong trajectory. So what I'm saying really is that you really want to get specific to develop an emotional attachment to the cause. So talk to animals and plants in your project, because I think that will be more far reaching to create an emotional response in your end users, in people that really care about the environment, rather than using these broad sweeping terms such as wildlife, because it's too daunting.
That's excellent advice. And every time I hear you speak and see your writings and other writings on this topic, I learn a little bit more, and certainly it gives me more of a conscious understanding of what we can do as lighting industry practitioners to help the world be a better place, and not just for foot candles. It's certainly a complex issue, one that not everyone embraces, but certainly appreciate what you're doing to help promote the cause and to help promote the awareness and making those strides. So thank you for everything you're doing there, Jane, and thank you for joining us for 5 Big Questions.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.